The Appeal by Sir Thomas Wyatt. Let me give you the full title of the poem. The Appeal, an earnest suit to his unkind mistress not to forsake him. And we are going to the Elizabethan age. I would like to remind you that we began our series with a poem by Shakespeare, of course, the best known writer of the Elizabethan age. Why do we call it the Elizabethan age? You would remember because it was Queen Elizabeth I, mind you, who ruled for a long time. It was a period of peace and prosperity, and all the arts and culture got a lot of recognition and encouragement under this queen. It is at this time that English poetry really began to flower and to bloom. The Petrarchan sonnet was very popular then, and we are looking at two writers of that period, Wyatt and Surrey. Usually we talk of them together, but this poem, of course, is only by Sir Thomas Wyatt. And what is the poem? I'm repeating the title because it's very interesting. An earnest suit to his unkind mistress not to forsake him. This is not a sonnet, but in that age, the most popular kind of poetry was the sonnet. The Petrarchan sonnet, which the English poets imitated and copied and translated, and then the very own Shakespearean sonnet or the English sonnet. Sir Thomas Wyatt, 1503 to 1542, was educated at Cambridge, had a career at court, travelled even to France as a courier of the English ambassador. He journeyed to Italy. He was there when the golden age of poetry began and allowed the Petrarchan kind of sonnet to influence him. You know what is interesting about the Petrarchan sonnet? The women there were cruel and scornful, and the poor lover was always forlorn and rejected. The poem is an appeal to the beloved. A lot of guessing has gone on, and it has been suggested that probably I'm saying Wyatt was in love with Anne Boleyn. You remember? The same Anne Boleyn who later Henry VIII married and then had her executed. But this is only a guess, so we are not very sure. His sonnets began by being translations or adaptations. And interestingly, his poems were published after his death in a volume called Tottel's Miscellany in the year 1557. The poem begins with the lover entreating the beloved not to leave him. Let me begin as usual by reading the poem. And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay for shame, to save thee from the blame of all my grief and game. And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, say nay. We've looked at many poems where there is repetition, and I've always mentioned that repetition is used for emphasis, to draw the attention of the reader to what the poet wants to say. And what does he want here? He wants his beloved to say nay, say nay. Nay to what? Don't go away. Are you going away? Are you going to leave me? And though he goes on, and wilt thou leave me thus, that hath loved thee so long, in wealth and woe among, and is thy heart so strong, as for to leave me thus? Again he goes back. Don't leave me. I've loved you for so long, and you also said you loved me. Can you bear this separation? Please say no, say nay, say nay. And he goes on, and wilt thou leave me thus, that hath given thee my heart? Never for to depart, neither for pain nor smart. And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, say nay. I hope you're paying attention to the fact that the last two lines are being repeated in each stanza. And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, say nay. And it goes on into the next verse. And wilt thou leave me thus, and have no more pity of him that loveth thee? Alas, thy cruelty! And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, say nay. You would notice that we have no idea why the beloved has decided to leave her lover. Obviously, the lover continues to love her and he wants her to stay back. No reasons given, and you're just going away. How can you be so cruel? How can you depart? How can you do that to me? He goes on. Say nay, say nay. Remember, I told you that this is the typical Petrarchan woman. Cruel, disdainful, uncaring, and the lover, how is he? Rejected and forlorn. I'm not sure if there are many more poems written in the same way, but if you look at the Petrarchan sonnet, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. And this is what Thomas Wyatt says in this poem. Wilt thou leave me? He begins with that and he goes on and on, say nay, say nay. Yes, a love poem, but a love poem at parting, a love poem at separation. But notice there are no metaphors, there are no similes, which we usually associate with Elizabethan poetry, but none of it here. Notice that this poem has ever so many punctuation marks. Two, mainly the exclamation and the question mark. They keep coming again and again. What does it do? The exclamation, yes, but the questions, when they are repeated, they are drawing our attention. At the same time, most of these questions are rhetorical questions. I want to pause a moment and talk about something which I don't think I've really done in my earlier episodes. We know, I think we know, a couplet. In Hindi, we call it the doha. Right? A couplet is a two-lined stanza. Just for the fun of it, just to increase your vocabulary. A single-line stanza is called a monostitch. A three-line is called a tercet. A four-line is called a quatrain. And we could go on and on till the Spenserian one, which was a 9-line stanza. Look at the poems that you have read and see what kind of stanza form they have. So we have rhetorical questions, we have repetition. There is something called anaphora. Do you remember the word? That is repetition at the beginning of lines. And what am I saying here? Say nay, say nay. And wilt thou. Look at each stanza begins with and wilt thou. This is called anaphora. Another word, probably a new word, is an epiphora, which is repetition at the end of lines, right? So what do we have here? When he says, say nay, say nay. Or look at the second last, the last but one line, where he says, leave me thus. It comes again and again in each of the stanzas. There is a rhyme scheme, which we know. A, B, we have heard. Now, how is this rhyme scheme? You've got thus, shame, blame, game, thus. So I think you could quickly put your A, B together, can't you? Do try doing that, because that's how the rhyme scheme is marked. So, simple figures of speech, and as I mentioned earlier, no similes, no metaphors, no personification, no apostrophe, etc. Look at the poem, an Elizabethan age poem of love, more about separation after love. Those of us who love reading poetry and poetry about love, you would have noticed that love has two sides. One is the meeting and the second is the parting. We have looked at other poems too. I just want to recall how I began this series with a poem by Shakespeare. It was a sonnet, it was a love sonnet. And now 2 years later, we are back with a poem from the Elizabethan age, again about love, but ever so different. Is love forever? Is a question I ask when I read a love poem. And the answer is, well, 50% of times it is. So this poem is one which is about parting. And if parting is with both sides, what we call an amicable parting, it could be different. It could be less painful. It could be filled with nostalgia about all those years we were in love. But here is a poem where the lady departs and the poor lover is not yet ready to accept why she wants to leave him. Obviously, because he doesn't know the reason. Maybe if he knew the reason, he would correct himself. Well, Elizabethan poetry has so much of love, and I'm sure you'll enjoy reading many more of the poets of that period. I hope they are not about say nay, say nay.